A man who leaks his sexual energy. His gaze is hungry. He's constantly scanning, looking for novelty. He's not present. Women feel it. Men feel it. He himself feels that his sexual energy is not contained. It is scattered outward, leaking into all kinds of places and robbing him of his true power. In a committed relationship, this leads to a lack of safety, a lack of true connection and intimacy and trust. But even if a man is single, one might say, is it not just harmless? There's a big difference between a harmless flirt done in a conscious way when a man is single, or constantly, unconsciously gazing, scanning, looking for novelty, having that hungry gaze and totally losing presence and thereby losing power. Why does this happen? Why do so many men unconsciously leak their power everywhere they go? And they carry this, the wandering eye, into committed relationships. And how can men stop this leak to become fully sovereign, rooted in their true masculine power? Today I'll break down why the wandering eye has become so normalized, what it really reveals, how a man can reclaim his energy, so women can truly feel safe with him again, so he feels sovereign and rooted. And this episode is not only for men. Women will finally hear words for something they have felt deeply in their hearts. My name is Lorin, and I'm a coach, author, and hypnotherapist. I help you to understand masculine and feminine dynamics at the deepest level. The wandering eye is not just looking. A present gaze is neutral. It's not looking for something. The wandering eye, that leaky energy, is a form of taking, a form of scanning. There is a hunger for novelty and excitement to feed from that validation, to validate perhaps something through that gaze, or to simply be fully unconscious in that objectification of the woman that a man is scanning and gazing at. There's a leakage of presence and a leakage of power. How does this feel to others? Specifically talking about women. Women feel unsafe, unseen, and almost unconsciously repelled by this hungry gaze. At least very conscious women. Men, even though they might not be consciously aware of it, can sense that a man who is constantly unconsciously gazing, scanning, is not very rooted and anchored inside himself. So this is not necessarily something conscious because this has become so normalized in men, but other men can feel there isn't a really strong leadership here. The energy is outward rather than contained inward. Power is not contained, power is leaking. And the energy, this wandering eye, specifically at the extreme, constantly unconsciously engaging in this, the energy it's sending out is, I'm a boy hunting, not a king who's rooted in himself. Let's make this more practical. A man who leaks energy in this way is not rooted inside himself. He's led by lust rather than presence and meaning, rather than value and virtue. No man led by lust truly respects himself. And if a man does not fully respect and honor himself, he cannot fully respect and honor others. His inner lack of integrity is mirrored outward. Most men don't realize that when they are deeply in unconscious scanning, gazing, and objectification of women out on the street or wherever it is, that in these moments they're deeply led by lust, and that also that there is a deep disrespect behind that, because it is essentially equating a woman to a mere sexual object. But in that moment, because of a lack of presence and consciousness, there isn't a necessarily conscious realization behind that. Yes, there are men who don't give a shit, but that's more in the small percentage. Most men who engage in this, it's been so conditioned, it's so ingrained in a man, and they don't have that level of, they don't hold themselves to that standard of integrity inside themselves, that their lack of respect towards their own integrity and doing what is right and being a man who is contained in his energy and not leaking outwards, this is being reflected, that there is a sense of deep disrespect and disregard of a woman and only seeing her as a sexual object. So let's dive into the core root and reasons as to why these wandering eyes here, why there is such a leakage in power and sexual energy, and also then afterwards the step-by-step solution for men to break free from it, and for women to hear the journey men need to go through in order to free themselves of this. Number one is a normalization and unhealthy masculine role models. So let me give you an example from my personal life. I've talked about this several times already. My father died very early in my life. My role model died. So I was desperately, as a teenager, looking for male role models. But what of course so often happens is that you find the wrong male role models because there aren't many men who embody the awakened or healthy masculine energy that I'm talking about. More and more now. But as I was growing up and lost my father, the role models I had were all men who had a deeply unhealthy and wounded relationship with the feminine, and who all also had a father wound themselves. You could even say that my kind of inner wounding felt connected unconsciously to their inner wounding. That's most likely why I was drawn to these people. And of course, as it works, the deep sense of belonging, it's so primal. I wanted to belong, I wanted to be part of the tribe, I wanted to be seen and validated by these role models. And what I learned is chase women and the kind of gaze, and then these men saying, look at how hot her arse is, or saying things, strange things such as 4 o'clock, which was a kind of signal of looking where the number 4 is. There was a hot girl, quote unquote, and saying nice tits or whatever, or making sounds after they see a beautiful woman, physically beautiful woman on the street. Acts that were, of course, there's a deep disrespect in that. It wasn't necessarily that they had a hatred towards women, it was that they objectified women and disrespected women in that way because they themselves didn't know and have never been modeled by another man what it means to live with deep integrity and to treat the feminine in the right way. But this is how I grew up. This is what I saw day in and day out. And this is what happens for so many men. This behavior becomes normalized. Everyone else is doing it. Young boys wanting to belong. So there are a lot of elements that play into this. I'm not downplaying this. I'm not excusing men, but I'm telling you the honest truth that this is not just about men decide to be arseholes, disrespect women, objectify women, and don't give a shit. This might be the truth for some men in this world, but it is not the truth for most men. Most men would have experienced something, what I experienced along the lines of that this has been deeply normalized. And it never sat right with me. It never felt good to see that behavior. But I overrided my intuition for belonging, at least for a while on my path. Because I felt abandoned by the death of my father. I felt lost. I didn't know what it meant to be a man. So my desire to belong, to be accepted, was more important than trusting my deeper intuition and deeper sense as a teenager. But then what happened is eventually it felt so empty and so off to me that I realized I could no longer live that life of trying to fit into a system that I see as deeply wounded and not right and not in integrity in my soul and heart. The normalization hides the problem. The constant porn use, the scanning for validation, the hungry gaze, the objectification of women, the constant chasing of novelty. It becomes so normalized that it's not seen as a problem, as an issue, as a leaking of energy, as a leaking of power. It's almost equated to manhood and being a man itself. Well, this is just how it works. So again, I'm not excusing men, but you gotta put yourself in the shoes of men who are young boys, father absent, died, or emotionally, physically absent, not at all in his power, not modeling what it means to be a man, a healthy masculine man, and the desire to belong, the desire to be validated for the first time in their life, because in that is a desire to be loved, to be accepted, to be seen. So there are a lot of elements that play into this normalization. Imagine a young boy doesn't have the resources and level of awareness and consciousness to, in these moments, reject that and say, no, this is not how I want to live. This is out of integrity. I choose to live like this and to spend time in deep solitude. This is what I eventually did after a few years of experiencing this environment and trying to fit into it, even though I felt more and more lost and more empty inside myself. But that wasn't an easy path. Being in solitude in nature, reclaiming integrity, I felt deeply alone. At the same time, my soul and heart just told me better to be alone and live in truth and integrity than to be surrounded by dysfunction and wounding and living out of integrity. But that's not an easy journey. That's not an easy thing we ask of men, to just override their deep need for belonging, heal their abandonment wound, and to say, I rather be alone in solitude than to be accepted and living without integrity and out of alignment with my truth. Gladly, things are changing now. Gladly, because of the work I'm doing, because of the work other men are doing, men's groups are emerging more and more. It's so beautiful to see this work unfolding so rapidly and so powerfully. At least it feels rapidly and powerfully to me, because I'm in this bubble of men's work. But if you look at it at a collective level, it's not necessarily unfolding rapidly and exponentially, unbelievably fast. But still, there's a huge shift going on. When I was going through this, I had no fucking clue of men's groups and ideas of what it means to be a man and conscious masculinity. Which leads us into root cause or reason number 2, which is an unintegrated shadow. I often call this eroticized wounds. An eroticized wound is when we bypass the safety of our heart for pleasure. No one really knows. There isn't a real scientific evidence for this because it's really tricky and no one understands really how this works with arousal and attraction, etc. To a degree, but not entirely, of course. But one theory which I really like is that for the brain, it's easier to sexualize things than to feel the rawness of the trauma and pain we experience. So when we feel abandoned as children, young boys feel abandoned or young girls feel abandoned, wounds can become sexualized. And apparently also, by some theories, kind of the place where we store trauma, or at least the memory, trauma is stored in the whole body, but the memory of trauma in the brain is near the part that is responsible for arousal. So this is a theory. At the end of the day, we don't know exactly, so don't take me literally here, but I believe that that might actually be a part truth or get very close to it, that these things become confused because people being attracted to this kind of dark sexual energy, flirtation, and all these things, leaking energy and bypassing what is right and integrity and safety for lust. I believe there is a huge element of trauma and wounding here, which leads to an unintegrated shadow, specifically an unintegrated sexual shadow. The chase, the conquering, the admiration from women. It feeds that sexual shadow, which has been unconsciously fed for so many years, the constant scanning, gazing, overuse of porn, being overly exposed to sexual images, objectifying women constantly, a hypersexualized brain feeding a sexual shadow. Attraction born from shadow is a high, not a soul truth. It's a high from a drug. And it's a high so many men are constantly looking for. But it's a high that only, like any drug, the more you experience of it, the more empty you feel afterwards, and the more you seek it. It becomes this endless cycle until you truly choose to heal it and break free from it at the root. Most men don't even know that for most of their life, they've been unconsciously feeding, almost like a monster, a sexual shadow inside themselves. The constant engagement in these things, the constant hyper-sexualizing absolutely everything around them. And this also being normalized because everyone else or almost everyone else is doing it. So it's not even seen as something that needs to be worked through, healed, or integrated. And then the third root or core reason really is the absence of devotion. The absence of devotion and purpose or mission dedicated to something higher than ourselves. Because without a deeper purpose, without a deeper vision of who a man wants to be, what he wants to create, the values and virtues he wants to embody, the legacy he wants to leave the world with, lust can very easily hijack a man. Viktor Frankl, the concentration camp survivor, I believe born in the same town where I was, in the same city where I was born, Vienna, from Austria. Incredible story. It's the famous book, A Man's Search for Meaning. Incredible read. But he speaks about in the absence of purpose, kind of lust and distraction takes over. So sexual energy is not something that can be stopped. It's like trying to put a lid over an overflowing river, like putting a towel over a river that is so powerful, or trying to stop a waterfall with a little towel or two towels or whatever. You get the gist of what I'm saying here. It just doesn't work. The water is too powerful. This life force energy, which is sexual energy, is too powerful. It flows. If you stop the flow, you suppress it. This leads to all kinds of other problems. What you suppress gets pushed into the shadow. It is not integrated, it is not owned. So what we need to do rather is to harness and contain sexual energy. And the most powerful way to do this is to devote ourselves to something higher. Because if a man is led by lust, it ultimately means he hasn't yet found a purpose and devotion to something higher than himself. His primal instincts are leading. Something else needs to lead. And it doesn't matter whether you call that God, universe, spirit, Shiva, the divine masculine, Allah. It does not matter what you call it. You can call it virtue like the Stoics, or it doesn't matter. You can make this practical or the most spiritual name in the world. It's all one and the same at the end of the day. It's about that higher ideal, that higher value, that higher vision. Because when you have that, everything else in your life orients itself towards that. Sexual energy including. Sexual energy is pure power. Sexual energy makes you vibrant, alive, vital. Without it, you'd feel much less alive and vibrant and have much less fire and energy. But it needs to be channeled into something higher. Don't confuse this with transmutation. You need to, like a perfect saint. A saint is an illusion. Krishnamurti said this amazing quote. The progression from sinner to saint is just another illusion. So if you go, I transmute all this sexual energy only in love and light and purity and innocence, that's all bullshit. That's all creating another shadow, kind of spiritual monk, enlightened persona, which is not true. There is that animalistic sexual side of us, strong sexual fantasies and desires. We're not suppressing them. Instead, we want to go into full ownership and dedicate ourselves to something higher than ourselves, a higher idea, higher vision, higher mission. It's a powerful quote. When you live without devotion, without purpose, your energy is for sale for the highest bidder, which usually is lust. So just before we go into the solution, the step-by-step steps you can take, very briefly, let's talk about the cost of leaking sexual energy. Women lose respect, feel unsafe, disconnect sexually. Women feel that lack of presence, the constant scanning, looking for novelty. There is no sovereignty, there is no sense of inner rootedness. All there really is that the hungry gaze of the boy. Men themselves, even if they might be disconnected from that, they feel depleted, often ashamed, disassociated, and out of integrity. And life itself loses vitality, as expressed before, because sexual energy is life energy. It's hurting everyone. And the one it destroys the most is the man himself. It's not about stopping this for a woman. It's about stopping it for himself first. So what is the solution? How can a man contain and reclaim his power? It starts with step 1, which is awareness. Holding yourself to a higher standard. It will happen again if it's conditioned into you. But catch yourself every time your energy leaks. Looking is not the issue unless you're looking for something, you're looking at something, you're trying to scan, you're objectifying. That's different. But naturally, it's not about looking on the ground and trying to be some kind of I never look and restricting yourself. In your view, specifically if you're in a city or in your place with a lot of people, there will be other women. I mean, it's impossible not to see other women walking past you, walking in front of you, whatever. It's impossible. The key is looking with presence and not becoming unconscious in these moments and allowing that kind of unconscious gazing and that hungry look to take over. That leak, that subtle leak, which is not so subtle if you really look into it or feel into it at a deeper level. So if you notice that scanning for novelty, pause for a moment. And the way to do this, step number 2, is pattern interrupt, which is one powerful breath. And you want to direct that breath into your cock and balls, into your lower belly. So really breathing deeply through your nostrils. It's not about 10 hours of breath work. One powerful breath in the moment interrupts the pattern and is often much more powerful than the most powerful breathwork session in a moment where you feel aligned. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's about when it is used. And here you want to interrupt the pattern. So one powerful breath. Each time you catch yourself with your awareness and you take one powerful breath. And as you do that, you're able to snap yourself out of that energy. And then what do? You don't look, you consciously disengage. You don't look again, you don't check again. Instead, you bring your energy inward. You don't allow it to go outward. And what you're doing here is you're containing your sexual energy. And as you do this, you become more magnetic. You feel more powerful. And you become 1,000,000 times more attractive to the feminine, especially the awakened feminine. Your energy transforms because this is true self-mastery and masculine embodiment, from lust and primal instincts to sovereignty. Step number 3, or step number 2, if you will, because the breath is part of step number 1 of the awareness, is containment practices. And what this essentially means is you don't want to get rid of a habit because otherwise you rely on will strength. So if you constantly watch porn, for instance, many times during the week or whatever it is for you, and then you say, I'm going to stop right now. And then maybe on a good week you stop, or maybe a good month or even longer perhaps, but then something really painful happens and you fall right back into it and feel even more ashamed. This is because that constant, wherever the energy leaks, is often a form of self-soothing. It's a form of escaping painful emotions. It's a form of avoiding deeper pain, specifically through female validation or that sexual novelty. That is a very, very powerful drug in that sense, that can give you a momentarily high and distract you from deeper pain and things that need to be shifted in your life. So what you do is you want to replace habits. Otherwise, you rely on will strength. And will strength, it's not about this kind of idea, I just gotta be stronger. No, everyone has weak moments. You don't want to make space for that because then you will feel even more ashamed. I can't do it. I'm so bad. It just leads further into the shame spiral. Replace means every time you want to watch porn, don't go and take a cold shower and do 20 push-ups. This is a very rigid, overly stoic approach. This doesn't make sexual energy flow in the right way. Instead, it's more kind of a suppression of it. What you can do is go into a self-pleasure practice without stimulant and visualization. And instead focus on your body, focus on your breath. And for instance, practice semen retention, if that is a practice you want to take on. But if you do so, it's another topic for another podcast. If you do so, practice it in the right way. Don't just do whatever and go against your intuition. Always listen to your body. These things are powerful and they need to be done in the right way. But a self-pleasure ritual that is focused on connecting with the body, opening the sacral chakra, allowing the energy to flow into your heart, rather than leaking outward and feeding your sexual shadow. The difference is consciousness and presence, rather than the absence of consciousness and presence and heart. So find all these ways and try to replace them with something that empowers you, makes you more conscious, and makes you more present. If afterwards you feel more in your power, then it's usually a good sign that you are on the right path. Step number 3, own your sexual desires fully. We talked about this in the previous episode. You have to be able to own your sexual desires and be able to express them to your woman, to your wife, to your partner. Because if you're not able to own and express this energy in your relationship, then by nature it will be suppressed, and that suppression will lead you to leak it in other places. Many men are not aware, but they feel deep shame around this. They are not able to channel this into their relationship, their committed relationship, and then it leaks into all kinds of places. Make sure you don't have to look in other places, but instead bring them to your sanctuary in a conscious way. Own them so they don't own you. Express them consciously with your beloved or future beloved, rather than leaking them everywhere. This allows for sexual energy to flow freely, because that's what sexual energy wants, or that's the most conscious way of relating to it that actually works in the long term. And the final step, to live with deeper meaning, purpose, and devotion. And the way to do this is to ask yourself some very powerful questions. What am I devoted to? What is my highest vision as a man? What legacy do I want to leave the world with? Who do I want to be remembered for? Who do I choose to become? And what standard do I hold myself to when no one is watching? And if that's a standard of integrity, containment, power, wow, then you are on the highest path of self-mastery. Journal on this. Write them down, feel into this, take time. Time spent on this is the best way you can spend your time. The most rewarding way. It's the hard path, but it's the only path. These questions, the answers to these questions, and be ruthlessly honest with yourself, they reveal so much about the work that needs to be done and the next steps to take. Sexual energy is not to be suppressed. It is to be contained, owned, and directed consciously, devoted to something higher, or oriented to something higher. When you stop leaking it everywhere, you become magnetic, because you no longer chase. You start to radiate power as a man. The wandering eye is only a symptom. The cure is more consciousness and presence, and holding ourselves to a higher standard of living in truth and integrity with ourselves. When you embody this as a man, a woman who is conscious specifically feels so safe with you. It awakens and cultivates desire and attraction and polarity at the absolute highest level. And life itself will respond to your energy in magnificent and unimaginable ways, honoring you because you honor yourself. If this episode served you deeply, you can leave a 5-star review or a thumbs up if you're watching this on YouTube. By subscribing to this show, by sharing it with one person who might benefit from this, or on your social media, or writing a short written review, all of this makes a huge difference. You can check the show notes for other free offerings. The one I always mention is my free newsletter, value-packed email that I send out every Friday, lorin.com/newsletter. You can subscribe for free to my exclusive email list there. And I've got other really powerful trainings, lorin.com/trainings, upcoming for men, women, couples, singles. Thank you so much for being here. It is a true honor to be of service in your journey.